All right, guys, today we are going to review percent change, error, and simple interest. So in the first problem, you invest $1,200 in each of two accounts. Account A earns simple interest rate of 5% over 3 years, and account B earns simple interest rate of 6% over 18 months. We need to find the interest earned by each account, and then we will compare the results. So remember, each time that you start a problem with simple interest, you should always begin by putting the formula down on your paper. Then you can fill in what you know. So in the first problem, we invested $1,200. So $1,200 is the principal. It said that in account A, we are earning 5% interest, and that's going to be over 3 years. So we are looking for I, which is interest. So in this first problem, multiply the 3 together and fill in your result. You should get $180 in earned interest. Let's compare that to account B. Once again, you're going to write down the simple interest rate formula and fill in the parts that you know. We again are looking for I. We have $1,200 again, and this time we're investing it for 6% interest over 18 months. Now remember, when you're given the information in months, we want that as a yearly value, so I'm going to write it as a fraction. 18 over 12 because there are 12 months in a year. The result is $108. So looking at both of these, you can see that we clearly would earn more interest with account A than we do in account B. So account A would earn more interest. Let's go ahead and take a look at another simple interest rate example. Alec deposited $7,200 in a savings account 3 years ago. The simple interest rate is 5%. How much money did Alec earn in interest, and what would his new account balance be? So there are two questions here. So for the first one, let's go ahead, once again, start with that formula, and let's fill in what we know. We know he deposited $7,200, so that is the principal. We also know that he's getting 5% interest, and it's going to be over 3 years. So we are looking for I. If you multiply those three numbers together, you should see an interest of $1,080. Now that's the first part of the question. Notice that the second part says what is his account balance. So he started with $7,200. He earned an interest of $1,080. You just need to simply add those two numbers together, and it looks like his account balance will be $8,280 after 3 years. In example 3, suppose you deposit $800 in a bank account with simple interest rate of 2.5%. You want to keep your deposit in the bank long enough at least to get $200 in interest. How long should you keep your deposit in the bank? So we are going to be looking for time in this problem. But once again, go ahead and write down your formula. Since we want $200 in interest, I is going to be $200. We started with $800. That is our principal. We are investing it at 2.5%. And like I mentioned earlier, we want to see how long it's going to take us to get that $200 in interest. So for this one, since we're looking for T, we need to multiply the principal times the rate. So go ahead and do that. Remember, this is a percent key here. So once you've entered that in your calculator, you should get 20. But that T is still right next to the 20. That's what we're looking for. So to undo the multiplication of 20 times T, we are going to divide by 20 on both sides. 200 divided by 20 is 10. 20 divided by 20 is our 1T. So you can see that it's going to take us 10 years in order to get $200 of interest. Let's take a look at example 4. You deposit $4,500 into a bank account with simple interest rate of 3%. How can you find the account balance after 2 years? Then find the account balance after 2 years. What would you do first? Well, like I've mentioned in every single problem, you should always start with this formula and fill in what you know. So for this one, it says that we have $4,500 in a bank account and we're earning 3%. How can you find the account balance? So let's fill in what we know. We need to find the interest. So we're going to take $4,500 times the interest rate of 3% for 2 years. So this one is something where you just multiply the 3 together to get the interest. That is going to be $270. Now the second part of the question was, how do you find the account balance? You take your interest and you add it back to the principal. So the principal is equal to $4,500. Then we're going to add to it the interest that we just calculated, and that is $270. Once you add those two together, you should have a grand total of $4,770. You do need both answers here. Number 5, you deposit $1,000 into a savings account that earns simple interest. After 5 years, your balance is $1,150. Decide what you need to do first to find the interest rate. Then find the interest rate. Well, the first thing, if we deposited money and we had $1,000, but after 5 years, we then have $1,150, the difference between these two must be the interest that we earned. So the first thing we need to do is to subtract these two to figure out how much interest we earned. Because remember, if you start with $1,000 and you end up with more money, you must have earned interest. So let's take the difference between the two. So 1,150, subtract 1,000, and it looks like we earned $150 in interest. Now we can go ahead and go to our formula and use that to figure out the interest rate. So I for interest is going to go right here, 150. The principal was 1,000. That's what we started with. We do not know the interest rate. That's what we're looking for, so keep the R there. And the time was 5 years. So now let's go ahead and multiply 1,000 times 5. That's 5,000. And of course the little r, what we're looking for, remains in the formula. To undo this multiplication, let's divide both sides by 5,000. If you divide 150 by 5,000, you are going to get a decimal. But of course we can move that 2 places to the right so that we can add our percent symbol, and the answer is 3%. Let's go on to number 6. To find simple interest, you multiply the principal in dollars, the interest rate as a decimal, and the time in years. The equation 13.50 equals 300 times 0.015 times 3 shows how to find the simple interest for a certain account after 3 years. What is the interest rate as a percent? How much is the simple interest? And what is the principal? So for this one, you just need to look at the equation right here and pick out the information. Remember, our formula looks like this, and I'm pretty sure that you know that by now. So let's just pick out the values. The interest rate as a percent. So right here we can see our rate, which is that value, but we want to turn it into a percentage. Notice they asked us to report it that way. Let's move the decimal over 2 places. That would be 1.5, and don't forget that percent symbol. How much is the simple interest? That would be I. So it looks like in this one, it's going to be $13.50. And what is the principal? That's $300. So for this particular question, you only need to look at the equation and pick out the various values. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on then to the next question. Oops, I think I passed it up. We're going to do number 7 next. Suppose you earn $12 in interest in account A and $5.25 in account B after 6 months. If the simple interest rate is 4% for account A and 3% for account B, which account has the greater principal? Okay, so let's go ahead and set everything up. Let's have account A first. So in account A, let's go ahead and start with our formula again. And we are going to be looking for that principal. So in account A, it said we earned $12 in interest. So let's go ahead and replace I with 12. Since we're looking for the principal, let's leave the P in the problem. We've got 4% in interest. Right here it says that for account A. And it looks like in both we're going to leave it in for 6 months. So remember, when it's given in months, we need it as a yearly value. So it's going to be 6 divided by 12. So when you multiply 4% times 6/12, make sure you're using that ABC button on your calculator. We're going to leave the 12 there. We're going to multiply these two together. So the P is actually going to stay in the problem. Once you do that, 4% times 6/12 is 0.02. And remember, the P is still in the problem. So to undo this multiplication, let's divide by 0.02 on both sides. Once you do that, you should get a principal of $600 for account A. Let's go over here. I'm going to separate my paper, and I'm going to figure out what we can get with account B. So again, always start with that magic simple interest formula. We have interest of $5.25 for account B. We are looking for principal. That account earns 3% simple interest, and again, it's going to be 6 out of 12 months. So you're going to multiply these two first. So $5.25 stays there. 3% times 6/12 is equal to 0.015, and my P is still there. So let's undo this multiplication right here, and we are going to divide by 0.015 on both sides. The principal for account B should be $350. So if we compare the results here, it looks like, to answer the question, which has the greater principal, it is going to be account A has the greater principal. And you're just comparing the 600 and the 350. Moving on to 8, Jan's savings account earns 1.5% simple interest per year. The balance in her savings account at the beginning of the year is $1,400. If Jan makes no deposits or withdrawals for a whole year, which is the closest to the balance she should have in her savings account at the end of the year? All right, let's once again start with our simple interest rate formula and fill in all of our information. Since we will be looking for interest, the principal started at $1,400. It said the rate is 1.5%, and it said at the end of a whole year, so it's only 1 year. All right, if we multiply these three values together, you should get 21, so that's $21. Since she started with $1,400, we are going to add that $21. And it looks like at the end of the year, she's going to have a balance of $1,421. It looks like our answer to this one is C. So remember, when it says the balance in the account, you've got to take the interest and add it back to the principal to get the balance. Moving on to question 9. If the original quantity is 8 and the new quantity is 10, what is the percent increase? So this is a percent increase problem. Remember, to find these, we are going to find the difference between the two numbers. So it's the big number, take away the smaller number, and we always divide by the original. In this case, it's 8. So 10 subtract 8 is 2, divided by 8. You are going to get a decimal, 0.25. But we need it reported as a percentage. So we're going to move it 2 places to the right, and that would give us 25%, and of course it is an increase. Question 10. If the original quantity is 16 and the new quantity is 20, estimate the percent change. Which of these is the best estimate of the percent change? Well, I like to figure out the actual, so let's do that. Find the difference between the two and always divide by the original. 20 take away 16 is 4, divided by 16. That is going to be a decimal, 0.25 or 25 hundredths. Moving it 2 places to the right, we get 25%, and of course it is an increase. That would be important because as you look at these answers, we do have 2 that are 25%. So you want to make sure you choose B. It was an increase. It went from 16 to 20. So it clearly increased in value. Question 11. Suppose the original quantity is 65 and the new quantity is 95. What should be the first step in solving for the percent increase? And what is the percent increase? So just like before, the first step is always to find the difference between the quantities. So we're going to take 95, always the larger number, subtract the smaller, and we always divide by the original. 95, take away 65 is 30, dividing by the original. So making sure you're using that calculator, 30 divided by 65, you are going to get a decimal. So this time we're just going to go ahead and round to the nearest whole percentage. If I move it 2 places to the right, that's 46.15. The nearest whole percentage would be 46%. And it looks like this again is an increase because it went from 65 to 95. Question 12, find the percent error. Now remember, with error, this we always have an estimated value, then an actual. So it says round to the nearest percent if it's necessary. So again, find the difference between the two. That did not change from percent change, but when you divide, you have to always divide by actual. So 42 take away 40 is equal to 2, and then we're going to divide 2 by 40, which is 0.05. Move it 2 places to the right, and it looks like this is 5%. 5%. Okay, moving along then to question 13. The table shows data from an experiment with 2 trials. Calculate the percent error. Which trial had the greater percent error? So you can see we have 2 trials, A and B. So let's do trial A first. We have 250, subtract 200, and then we're going to divide always by the actual, so that's 250. 250 take away 200 is 50. So using your calculator, divide 50 by 250. That's going to be equal to 0.2. And if I move it 2 places to the right, that is 20%. So for trial A, you want to fill in 20%. Next, let's do trial B. We're going to do the exact same thing. The larger number, subtract the smaller. And for percent error, you always divide by actual. 20 subtract 80 is 40. If I divide 40 by 120, you should get 0.33. If I move it to the right 2 places, it's 33%. And then it looks like it's asking which trial had the greater percent error. So you're just comparing these two, and it looks like that's going to be trial B. Okay, for the last question, suppose you deposited $100 in a savings account 2 years ago. The simple interest rate is 3.5%. The interest that you earned in those 3 years is $7. Which of the following is or are true? Rate must be entered as a decimal. So in digits, they always want to see the rate entered as a decimal. So as you look at these, the principal is definitely 100 because it set it up here, so that is true. It did tell us that we earned interest after 3 years of $7. Now notice that the rate, I wrote it as a decimal already. So in the problem, it's 3.5%, but to change it to a decimal, you move it 2 places to the left. So this is the correct decimal. You do not want to check the percent key, and it was for 2 years. So I'm going to mark that as well also. Now, when you're doing this problem, please make sure that you're paying really close attention to the rate. They definitely don't want it entered into digits as a percent, so it always has to be entered as a decimal. All right, thank you for watching.